you know where it hurts? Do you know what the incidents are that have happened that have made you feel unloved, that have made you feel like a disappointment to yourself and others? Do you know what you haven't healed from yet? I think a lot of us have had the experience of being hurt, of feeling the anger, of feeling that helplessness. And then there comes a moment when we have a choice. There's a time when we just have to feel what we're feeling. We have to get angry. We have to feel depressed. But there comes a time when we have the opportunity to choose to begin to move toward healing. We don't have to. We can stay stuck in the pain that may have happened 30 years ago, may have happened 10 years ago. We can stay stuck there. But we also have the opportunity to begin to move toward healing. Our God is a healing God, and being in relationship with God is healing. We are a community of faith, and being centered in a community of faith is a healing process. The gospel lesson that you've just seen portrayed before us is one of a man who is stuck in his pain. He may have been in this for a long, long time. If you can imagine this whole village being overwhelmed by his pain. This man howls at night. He bruises himself with stones. You can imagine the children in their beds in this little village and hearing this guy out the window howling. And some of us know what it is to hear the pain of our community. As we try to sleep at night, this summer's with windows open, we hear screaming, we hear sirens, we hear people talking loudly, and in many different ways we hear the pain of our community being expressed late at night. And this village knew the pain, the howling of this man. They tried to shackle him. That's what we try to do with our pain. We try to shackle it. We try to put it in jail. We try to remove it from our presence. But this man kept breaking the shackles. They could not contain him. But when he connected with Jesus, he began to get healed. And there were a few particular things that happened along that journey that we're going to explore this morning in some depth. First of all, Jesus named the pain. He asked the man, "What is your name?" And the man said, "My name is Legion." And we notice in this scripture that sometimes he's speaking as a man who wants to be healed, and sometimes he's speaking almost as a demon that has invaded him. Legion, my name is Legion. And we learn a lot from the name of the pain. And we need to learn to name our own pain. And then the second thing that happens is a release. They release this spirit, and it goes into the pigs, and it's drowned in the sea, and the man is freed. And he is sitting next to Jesus in his right mind. The people have not seen him in his right mind in who knows how long. But he's peaceful, and he's collected, and he's at peace. And then he wants to go with Jesus, but Jesus tells him to go and proclaim what has happened to you. The people in the village weren't ready to accept the healing yet. But this man went to them, and they were amazed, and there began to be a healing in the whole community because of what this man began to share. So we're going to look this morning at the ways that we can be healed in our hearts, healed of the pain that we have carried for years by naming it, and then by releasing it, and then by proclaiming it. First, we need a good name for what we're dealing with. You know, a lot of times, I think we just have a vague sense somewhere in the back of our heads that something's not right. You know, we may not even be aware of it. Somehow we have a headache, we feel a little depressed, we've been down for months, we're not sure what it's all about, and we just kind of go through with it. But we need to name it. We need to get a sense of what is it that I'm dealing with. You know, is it that relationship that ended like 3 years ago that I just haven't let go of yet? Is it, the ways I was bullied as a teenager? I mean, what is it that's still there, that's still lingering and causing me this pain? Last Sunday, we had a woman named Lorenza Andrade Smith who was with us. She's a minister, United Methodist Ministry in Texas, and she has a ministry of being with the homeless. That's her ministry. She gets no salary. She's just with people who are out on the streets. She sleeps out on the streets herself. And I saw on my Facebook last Saturday, she was in the Bronx and sleeping out on the streets. So first I said, well, you can stay with us if you want, but she didn't, because that's her ministry, to be on the streets. But then we invited her to worship. We had a chance to talk with her after lunch. And she said that there's a couple things she's learned about homelessness. First of all, she said it's exhausting. She said you usually don't get a good night's sleep. You're usually sleeping with one eye open. Something happens and you're awake, and especially if you're in a strange house, you're just exhausted all the time. And second, she said it's very lonely. You feel exposed. You don't have any privacy. And she said these are the things that torment you. And so often we look at people who are homeless and we make judgments. We say that person is lazy. Look at them. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and they're asleep on a park bench. But what we don't realize is how hard it is and that they're exhausted and they didn't get a chance to sleep last night. Sometimes there's some self-medication that begins to go on. And we may name that and blame that, but what really may be going on is just a real intense loneliness and an exhaustion. So we have to get to the real name of the pain before we can begin to move forward. In this particular scripture, the name is Legion. Now, as we move through the scripture, we realize that there's a social context to this pain. This is not just something this guy invented himself. He's engulfed in a legion. Now, we got to know that in this context, a legion is the Roman military. I mean, a legion is 2,000 Roman soldiers. That's what legion means. And when we begin to understand historically that this man comes from the town of Gerasa, and that Gerasa was one of the towns that was overrun by Vespasian's troops, and they burned it to the ground and all this thing, we begin to think maybe this man is suffering from post-traumatic stress. Maybe this guy is, a lot of times we just think it's an individual who's crazy, but we don't realize that we live in a society that's crazy. And we don't often look at the broader context of the issues that we're dealing with. Sometimes a woman is being mistreated by a person she's in a relationship with. And of course, this individual needs to be straightened out, and there's a problem there. But there's also a broader problem that we call patriarchy, that encourages and allows men to mistreat females in this society. And so there's often a broader context to the situation we live in. Some of us are still grieving from the loss of a loved one who died several years ago. And that's our pain. That's something we're healing from. And yet we live in a society that doesn't know how to deal with death. We're in a society that is in denial of death. That oftentimes our society doesn't want to hear about the pain and the grieving of death. And so we don't have good rituals for dealing with death. And we don't know how to be communal around something that we're all going to deal with. This is our common reality. And so we feel isolated in our struggle because we don't understand the broader social context of the things that we're dealing with. Last Sunday, Becky and I connected with an old friend that we had not seen in 20 years. Father Tison was a priest in the Philippines. Elise knows him. I first connected with him in 1983. When I first got connected with the Philippines, he was a political prisoner. He was one of those Catholic priests that had become the social action director of his diocese, and then he had gotten harassed by the military, and then they arrested him, and they put him in jail for 4 years. He was tortured, heavily tortured by the military, using all the techniques that a national security state can teach to many countries around the world. He was tortured in the most brutal fashion, the physical pain that he went through, the mental and psychological torture. It was heaviest the first 3 months. And then for 4 years, he lived in constant fear that one of the soldiers might show up and say, back to the torture chamber. It could happen at any time. He was powerless. And the torturers took off their masks. He said that was one of the hardest parts, that they actually walked around the prison and looked at him, and they saw each other face to face, his torturers, and they continued to be there. So when he finally got released in 1986, he left. He went to California, and he just wanted to move on with his life. He wanted to forget all about it. He wanted to get a job and move on. But for months, he noticed that he would get angry. He would have flare-ups of anger. He couldn't control his temper. He couldn't sleep at night. He was filled with anxiety. This went on for months and months. He finally met some Vietnam War vets, and he was talking to them, and he began to discover that I'm dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. And he was able to get in a clinic in Chicago and for a year have intensive therapy and begin to heal. But this healing process went on for years. And it was interesting when Becky first told me that we were going to connect with Father Tison again. I honestly, to be honest with you, I wasn't excited about that. Because the last time I had seen this guy 20 years ago, I just found it really hard to connect with him. He just seemed so insensitive. He seemed shallow to me. I had never really had a good connection with the guy. Well, this time it was a whole different thing. I had one of the most profound experiences being with this guy, the depth of the conversation we had, the wisdom he shared, the sensitivity, his interest in our family, his interest in our kids. I mean, it was like night and day. He has healed. This is a man that went through the most outrageous pain and suffering that a person deeply traumatized. And yet, over consistent work, he has named his pain and he has healed from his pain. He worked for 10 years with an organization that works with torture survivors. He was intentional about his pain, suffering, and moving through it. He finally, after all these years, has found his way back to God. That was a struggle for him. Where was God when I was suffering? But he has found his way, and he says now his most powerful community is his faith community in Washington, D.C. So by naming the pain, he is able to enter into it and find healing. One of the ways that the Dream Defenders have been so powerfully effective in dealing with the pain of the nation, this group of 20 or 30 people, probably better than anyone else, has put their finger on the pulse of the pain of the nation and has gone to the place, gone to the source. You know, it's not about George Zimmerman. They didn't go to George Zimmerman's house. It's about the state of Florida. It's about the state of the nation. It's about our justice system. It's about our laws. It's about the way that we have now allowed the killing of black men to be legal. And our system is broken. And they found the source. They went to the place. They went to the state capitol building. They sat in there. And they became the healing of a nation because they knew how to give the right name to the pain. They put their finger on it, and they went to the place. Name your pain. What really is it? What is it down there that's hurting you? What is it that has caused you to believe that you're less worthy than God has created you to be? What disappointments have you experienced? And how have you internalized those disappointments and made them to be who you think yourself to be? Can you put a name on your pain? When we can name it, we can begin to release it. In the Dream Defenders, I was just really struck. Last week, they pulled out. They did what they could. 31 days in the state capitol building, drew national attention to the problem, got several victories in terms of legislators saying they would hold hearings and different things like that. National attention, brought the thing, and then they decided, made a great decision that now we've done what we can. It's time to do something else. It's time to let go of this and move on to that. When you can name it, you can release. You don't get stuck. You can keep moving. How many of us get stuck in our pain? I heard a story. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and she was saying that she had a boyfriend, and then they broke up, and then like months were going by, and the guy was still sending her flowers. And then years had gone by, and she was going to college far away, and the flowers were still coming. Sometimes we just get stuck. It's time to move on. This is over. But we just can't let go of it. We just keep thinking about it. We keep focusing on it. We get stuck. How do we learn to release the pain? In this gospel story, the man releases the evil spirit with the help of Jesus. Jesus is with him. He's kind of coaching him through this process. This guy's been holding on to this stuff who knows how long. Maybe years. He's been stuck in this pain. Maybe he's been howling and bruising himself and, just he's so stuck in this pattern. This has become his way of life. And that happens to us. Our pain becomes our way of life. Our fear, we live out of our fear. We live out of our anxiety. We make decisions out of the pain that we've experienced. I was at a worship service yesterday, a funeral for an old friend. And just being in this particular sanctuary, and I've got stuff related to it. I've got stuff related to traditional religion. I got stuff related, and I was so conscious of my stuff. And here I am, there's beautiful music here, there's an opportunity to pray. These things do not have to become overwhelming obstacles to me. But when we get stuck in our stuff, we can't free ourselves to experience the power of God who is among us. So in this particular situation, Jesus and this man are having a conversation, and it's about releasing. We got to let go of this thing. We got to let go of this legion. How's that going to happen? Well, the conversation is fascinating. This passage you could write a book on, because there's so many things going on. But there's conversation with the man, there's conversation with the spirits. And it kind of speaks to the ways that we want to be healed, want to lull in our pain. You ever experience that kind of, some days, it's kind of like Amazing Collapsing Man. Remember that we talked about last week. Some days we're on and powerful, some days we're just falling apart. But in this conversation, they decide that they're going to release these spirits, this pain, into these pigs that are over here on the hillside. So when they release the spirits, they get into the pigs, and 2,000 pigs run down into the sea and are drowned. Now, when you hear that, you got to go, whoa. That was some serious pain. Are you kidding me? 2,000 pigs? You telling me the pain that this man was carrying was going to go into 2,000 pigs, and they were going to run down the bank and go into the sea? Well, I think that speaks at one level to the depth of some of the pain some of us are dealing with, and it's no wonder it's hard for us to function. But it also speaks to something very deep and symbolic and powerful here. 2,000 pigs, a legion, 2,000 Roman troops, crashed, drowned in the sea. Pharaoh's army drowned in the sea. There's just an awful lot of symbolism going on here. The central story of Israel is kind of coming out here when God is powerful enough to drown Pharaoh's army in the sea. If you want to get free individually or as a nation, our God is able. It does not matter if you got to walk through the sea. It does not matter if the sea has to part. It doesn't matter if a whole army needs to get drowned. Whatever needs to happen, our God is more powerful. We are dealing with principalities and powers. It's not just the individual hurts that we've experienced. It's not just that the people in our neighborhood are cranky and can't get their lives together. It's the fact that our whole neighborhood is living under the occupation of what is becoming an increasingly foreign occupying army. Our own government is becoming a foreign occupying army that is more intent on spying on us and putting certain people in jail than it is on bringing justice to the people of our community. This is what we're experiencing. We have to understand the overwhelming nature of the evil that we're dealing with. We minimize the power that the principalities and powers have in our lives. And so we heal, as Jeremiah said, we heal the wound of our people lightly, saying peace, peace, when there is no peace. We got to move down deep into the realities, name, and then release. Now, releasing can seem like a submissive act. And this is where a lot of us activists have a hard time, because we are taking on the powers that be all by ourselves. We are powerful, we're going to organize, and we got to organize. We are standing up and confronting power. We got to stand up and confront. We got to do that. But there comes a point, and the dream defenders found this, there comes a point when you've done what you can do in this particular battle. And then you need to release and move on. Now what's beautiful about this in our faith is that when we release, it's not a retreat at all. It's actually an advance. Because when we release, we're releasing to God. We're releasing to the one who is able to take on the principalities and powers. We are releasing to the one who can overcome that which we can't overcome. And even when we're active, even when we're in the campaign, even when we're in the heat of the struggle, we have to constantly be releasing the anger, releasing those things that are shackling us to God so that we can act in a healthy way. We want to be healthy in our activism. We want to be healthy in our relationships. We're going to be healthy in the ways that we relate with one another in the neighborhood. I saw a great quote that Alexis put up this week that said, it's very difficult to fight the enemy when it has outposts in your head. That's what happens. All that stuff that we're fighting on the outside, it's up in here. It's gotten lodged up in here. We begin to become little mini capitalists in our own ways. You know, we decry it, but we have the same kinds of greed and anxieties, and we don't understand that there are other ways because we're not well. We need to be healed. We need to find ways to release the pain. Let it go. When you've done what you can, let it go. If you need to make a call, and then let it go. If you need to forgive somebody, forgive them, and then let it go. It's so fascinating then when the villagers come and they find this man in his right mind. He has been named and released. This man is healthy and in his right mind. He is sitting there with Jesus. The villagers have never seen him like this before. And how would they react to such a thing? Well, they would be overjoyed. Our brother has gotten healed. Just think, man, our kids are going to be able to sleep at night without this guy howling. This is wonderful. Our village is going to find peace. Is that how they reacted, with joy? No, they were agitated. They were angry. They told Jesus to get out of here. What have you done? Get out of here. What is wrong with them? You know, one of the hardest things for us to release is our hopelessness. We can't live without our hopelessness. The problem with this guy getting healed is that these people can't be hopeless and cynical anymore. What are we going to do with ourselves if we're not cynical? And how great to be justified in our cynicism. The powers will always be that life will always suck. It's just the way it is. You know, life is tough, but I'm tougher. But life, you know, it's just never going to be good. And we can't live any other way. You know, the idea of somebody sitting in their right, sane mind is frightening to us. You know, it's not just them who are afraid of Jesus. We're afraid of Jesus. And we got all kinds of good reasons, especially as progressive people. We've been introduced to Jesus as an old conservative. You know, we've been introduced to church Jesus, you know, the traditional Jesus. We got all kinds of reasons. You know, blood, healed in the blood. What is that? You know, that's his way of abuse. You know, we got all kinds of, and a lot of it is true. It's justified. We're justified in decrying the co-optation of Jesus. We should. But is it any surprise? I mean, Martin Luther King 50 years ago, they've already totally co-opted him. Why wouldn't they co-opt Jesus? You know, that's the way our system works. But does that mean we reject Jesus? We reject co-opted Jesus, but Jesus is where the power is. This is where the man gets his healing. And this guy wants to go with him. He wants to stay with him. He's experienced the power of someone who can cut through the crap and get to the root and bring real healing. And so this guy wants to stay with him. He wants to be with him. He wants to go. He wants to leave his home and go with him. But Jesus says, no. Go back to your village and proclaim what God has done for you. Share what God has done for you. This is the third part of healing. Proclaiming it, claiming it, that we've been healed. We don't want to claim our healing. You know, we've been healed and we're still sick. You know, I'm feeling a lot better, but I know it's coming back next week. You know, yeah, I got a clear report from the doctor now, but I got to go back in 6 months, and I'm just sure it's going to all be back. But claiming our healing, Dion last Sunday gave us a powerful testimony about going through this terrible disease that she's struggling with, but yet claiming her healing in the midst of it, claiming the things that are happening, that are enabling her to get around better, that have gotten her a job back better. Claiming the healing is powerful. Jesus calls this guy to go back to his village and just begin to share. And what begins to happen? The people start to become amazed. They were shocked at first. They were outraged at first. They wanted Jesus to go away. Sometimes it's harder to enter into new healing territory than it is to stay in the old unhealthy territory because we're more familiar with it. But as they begin to get to know him again, begin to realize that the healing has happened, it's the proclaiming that begins to integrate the healing into his life and into his community. So I want to invite us to be people of the good news. To understand that as followers of Jesus, that of people who are born by God, created by God, in the world by God, given purpose by God, we are people of victory. Fundamentally, we are people of health. Fundamentally, our real intrinsic reality is that we are people of resurrection. Death will come, illness will come, pain will come, setbacks will come, disappointments will come, anger will come. All of us are going to be hurt. You're going to get hurt right here in New Day. It's going to happen if it hasn't happened already. Because we're a community of people, and people are flawed, and we hurt each other. We come in here, we got so many different kinds of hurts, we don't even understand them all. We say stuff intentionally or unintentionally, and we hurt one another. We misunderstand one another. It's going to happen in any collection of people that you're a part of. But the fundamental reality is not that. The fundamental reality is that we're a community of healing. We're a people of resurrection. We're a people of wellness. We're a people of good news. That's who we are at our deepest level. So when pain comes, when we get knocked off balance, don't let that make us forget who we are. As Ray would say, you are not forgotten, no matter what you may be going through. God is with you. God is coming to save us, to heal us, to lift us up, to allow us to live into the fullness of who God has created us to be. We are people of healing. We invite one another to name our pain. You can speak it out because it's not your overwhelming reality. It's something you're going through right now, but by naming it does not name you. Your name is different from your pain. So by naming it, you help distinguish it from yourself. And by naming, we can begin to release because we can understand that it's separate from me. It's not all of who I am. It's something that happened to me once or may be happening to me now, but it doesn't define who I am. So I can release the pain and continue to be who I am. And then I can proclaim the good news. I can be a person of the good news. I can be a person who is confident that not only are we going to win the victory, but we have already won it. And that all we're doing is playing it out, seeing it to its logical conclusion. The principalities and powers have no chance. They don't know it yet, but they have no chance because the victory has already been won. Amen.